Okay. Cool. So, well, now that we're on the same page, let's talk about how to get there. Um, so, I my argument is that drawing from imagination is you are presenting ideas in a way that is similar to a visual experience. So that if you were there, or if you were like, you can imagine being there in the place where the artist drew, or seeing the thing that the artist drew, like you're actually there right in front of it. So this is the example I really like to use. If you read the intro to my book, this is going to be review a lot of this. So Polis Verso by Jean Leon Gérôme from 18 something. I don't know that off the top of my head, but this is very believable, but completely from imagination. I'm sure he used some reference as well, but the idea and all of that stuff he put together um, out of his head. So why does this work? Before we get into this, what are we seeing here? We're seeing gladiators, we're seeing the Colosseum, we're seeing real figures. But what we're actually seeing is just pixels. There's just colors. There's just shapes. There's no gladiators. Um, but we get the ideas that these are real gladiators. Um, and I'm going to say that it's because it's presented in a way that's similar to how we would see it if we were actually there. So, for example, where are we in this space? We're in the arena. Yeah. How can you tell? Exactly. Yeah. Um, we're at the same level. So, but there is no level, right? Like it's all still shapes. It's all flat. So how is the level created? That's true. That's true, but that doesn't mean that like the middle of the image does not have to be the eye line of the camera. It is the perspective. Yeah, so it's perspective that allows us like where we see the bottom of things that are below us, and we see the top of things that are above us. So the horizon line is probably, like you said, eye level. Um, so the perspective is here, even though there's no vanishing points um, or no vanishing points. There is a horizon. There's no like you can't see the horizon line. He probably didn't go through and plot this, but he's still using perspective. Um, I drew right on the thing. So how do we know that these are gladiators? Yeah, um, the the context for sure. How do we know they're people? Sure, but we got to dig a little deeper than that. What makes these shapes and lines look like these shapes, colors, and lines look like people? Yeah, yeah. Like there's information because of our knowledge of how they're supposed to look. Yeah, there's information here that matches the information that we're used to when we see people. This is anatomy. Um, yeah, all of this stuff. There's all of this information here that's being communicated to us visually in a way that's similar to how we actually see. So I'm going to take a little bit of a technical detour, but you'll see where I'm going with this, hopefully. Um, so when we see, it seems like our eyes are just cameras, and that we see um, like directly from that camera into our brain. But so like this is the subject, it goes into my eye and into my brain. But it does not actually work that way. It is much, much more complicated. And we don't have to know all of this complexity, but a little bit is important to understand what we're trying to do here, at least what I'm trying to do here. So the the eyes do take in light like a camera does, but then there's a lot of processing that creates our experience of seeing. Um, so this process builds our actual experience of seeing, which is not a still image or a series of still images like video is. Um, it's not flat images. It's actually a three-dimensional mental model that we construct of our surroundings. So what we want to do when we're drawing from imagination is we want to we want to give enough information to our viewer so that they can construct their own mental model. And it has to be in a way that's similar to how we see. So going back to perspective, the reason, or one of the important things why this works, the polus verso, why this works, is because everything is consistent with being seen from a single point of view. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up an example of this. I should have prepared ahead of time, but I did not. So if we look at these shapes, these appear to be a box on a checkerboard because everything, all the shapes are aligned in a way that would suggest a checkerboard from a specific point of view. If one of those shapes is different, it sticks out, it breaks the illusion. Like this shape on top doesn't really fit the checkerboard, so it ends up looking like a flat shape or that the checkerboard is distorted somehow. In this example, we have shapes that suggest the box, but they suggest the box in a way that doesn't make sense with where the checkerboard is. So it's not creating that single point of view. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about it being like a visual experience. All right. So how we construct our mental model, we have our surroundings, which is like where everything is, and and objects, which I'm using in a very broad term, just like things that we recognize. And we construct this from forms, the position of those forms in space, and the light that hits those forms. So in the example of objects, like if you have an object and you look at it straight on, it looks a certain way. If you rotate it, do this in, oh, actually, you guys can't see my webcam. Well, you know how this works. If you rotate it, it looks different, but at no point are you confused that it's a different object because you recognize its forms and the position of those forms relative to each other in space. Those haven't changed, so you know it's the same object. And that's position is the position of those forms. And then light, you can actually get away with creating images without capturing light, but it definitely helps because that's how we see. So if we communicate all of those things, or sorry, this is how we see. So if we want to create an image, we translate our ideas. So let's get rid of all of this stuff. And now instead of what we're seeing, this box in my head is my idea. This, like you said, you have concepts in your head and you want to get those out. So this is your concept. If you can translate that concept into these things and then put that into a drawing, if somebody else sees your drawing and you've done this well, they will be able to construct your concept realistically. Does all this make sense so far? I know that was really technical, but it isn't. I do think it's important. It sets up other stuff later. So another important thing is that our visual system, it doesn't just create things back based on the light that reaches our eyes. It's also pattern recognition. So you see enough information of something that your brain fills in the rest. And yeah, object permanence, exactly. This is really important or this is really important for drawing because we don't have to draw all of the information. We draw some of the information and let the viewer fill in the rest of that from their own mental model, um, which frees us up from having to think about everything. We can choose what aspects we want to put in. So if I zoom into the crowd in Polis Verso, um, this isn't just an artifact of the digital reproduction. It's a big painting, but it's not that big. These figures here, there's not a lot going on. Just a few shapes in like more or less figure arrangement. If the painting was just this, like if I zoom in even more, or we're getting too pixelated, I'll do it a different way. So if I take it out of context, it's not really obvious what these things are. Like, kind of look like people, but in the context, you're not just seeing these like kind of abstracted shapes, you're seeing a full crowd of people because your brain fills that in from the context clues and the little bit of information there. So the reason this is so important is that this creates immersion where the viewer is not seeing lines and shapes anymore. Their brain is filling in the rest of the information. So you see the because of the blue particles in between. Sorry, I don't understand. Um, while she's typing, I'll keep going with my thought. Um, you see the or you experience the thing your brain has backfilled as well. Like there's lots of anime characters specifically where they don't draw the nose, or there's like one little line for the nose for the bottom of the nose at most. But when you see those, do you assume that the character has no nose? Yeah, the little shape, but sometimes there's even less than that. Um, but you assume it's there, and even that little shadow, right? Like you assume there's nostrils, you assume there's like the bridge of the nose and all that stuff, even though they didn't draw it, because you're familiar with faces and you backfill that. So, um, what we want to do when we're creating an image is we're going to translate our ideas into the form, position, and light, and then we need to translate that into the visual language of an image. So that would be visual elements, line, shape, value, proportion, and color. I'm not going to go into definitions of these. They're mostly pretty obvious anyway. But just this is the vocabulary that we have. So, it's like being a writer here. Instead of trying to copy exactly what we see, because that won't work, or copy exactly what's in our head, we're describing certain aspects of it. And like a writer, if they're telling a story, they don't tell every single fact of the story. That's impossible. They have to condense the story. They have to decide which aspects of what happened are important, and they communicate that. And then the reader reads the story and they construct their own version of it based on what the writer said. And they probably have to fill in a little bit of the blanks as well. So we're doing the same thing. We're choosing which aspects of our imagined subjects are important. We're translating that into forms, positions, and light. And then we're describing those with our language, which is line, shape, value, proportion, and maybe color. Um, so, how do we feel about this goal? Sorry, it seems what? Achievable? Yeah. Hmm. Okay, cool. Does this seem like something that you would want to achieve? Am I describing um, how you might want to approach drawing from imagination? Yeah, great. Yeah, yeah. I think that's very well put. That you're trying to express yourself. You're trying to tell a story. And I do think that ultimately that is the point of art, is that it's about communication. It's not about creating things to be perfectly realistic. You can, that can be part of the story. Sometimes it's important to make it clear, to make it very clear what you're describing, but sometimes it's not. And this mindset of using all of these things to describe a story, it frees you up from having to feel like you need to draw everything or you need to copy what you see. Um, because that's, first of all, if copying what you see is impossible, and second of all, it's just kind of, it's very frustrating, right? Because you can't get everything, or you get everything, or you get lots of things and it doesn't look good. So you don't have to. So let's talk about how we're going to learn this. And I break it down into a few different aspects of it. So the first is observation. And this is being able to draw what you see. You're not copying what you see because that's impossible for the reasons that I described. So this is, let's try to keep my layers organized. This is what you see, and you need to describe that experience. So the forms, positions, and light, and you're going to describe that with visual elements, line, shape, value, color, proportion, etc. Excuse me. And you translate your experience of seeing it into a drawing. Somebody else sees your drawing and they can create a similar um, experience of seeing in their mind. The reason that observation is so important is um, if we're learning to describe what we see, we need to study what we see. Or sorry, if we're learning to describe a visual experience, we need to study visual experiences. Or if we're learning to create fictional visual experiences, we need to study our visual experience to understand how it works. And learning to describe forms, positions, and light into visual elements is a really important part of the step. Because if instead of what I'm seeing, I have an idea, if I can describe my idea in terms of form, position, and light, then I'll have the skills that I need to describe it in a way that works. Um, Much easier to do this when you have a real object in front of you than to try to invent these things and learn to draw them at the same time. You're just juggling more balls than you have to. Like when you learn to juggle, you don't start with 4 or 5 balls, you start with 1 or 2. And then once you get better at that, you can add more. So that's what we're doing here. Back. If your drawing doesn't look like the thing that you're trying to draw, you can probably figure out why, or at least somebody else can help you figure out why if you can't figure it out on your own. So yeah, that is observation, and you'll use the visual elements to describe the ideas, the form, position, and light in your ideas the same way you will in observation. There was something else I wanted to say about it, but it just skipped my head. So I'll come back to it if I remember. So after that, the next skill we need, which I've been talking about already, is perspective. Um, so this is where you invent forms and positions. Linear perspective is a system of geometry that lets you do this with exact precision. Um, the way I teach this is that you learn linear perspective first, or at least enough of it. You can get really deep into it, but I'm not really interested in like 5 point perspective and crazy exact perspective stuff. Just enough that you can describe what you see from, or describe a space and form that you invent consistently as if it's from a single point of view. But you probably don't want to have to plot everything that you draw all the time. It's a weird way to work. It's not intuitive. And most of the stuff you draw is not going to be stuff like boxes and cylinders that conform to perspective very well. But if you learn perspective, you can learn to check your own work. So you learn to do this intuitively. Like I can draw a box from a specific angle. And then, actually, I know this is wrong. And then I will use perspective to check my work. And when I practice doing this, every time I correct a freehand drawing that's incorrect, it reinforces or like it builds a mental model of what it should look like. And then eventually I'll be able to do this intuitively and I'll be more or less right. I can still check my work. So we'll use perspective to build basic forms. If you spent any time on Reddit, they harp on this all the time, often incorrectly. But your box, your cylinders, your cones, these kind of things. And the reason you learn these is not to construct everything out of them. It's because they're similar enough to the forms of most objects that if you learn how to draw these well, you can kind of adapt it. So you don't construct objects like cylinders and boxes, but you can construct a structure for them out of cylinders and boxes, etc., cones, in perspective, and then you draw the details on top of that structure. That allows you to draw objects from your mind. So if you can draw these forms from any angle, and you can draw the structure of an object from any angle, then you can draw the object from any angle. There's a little bit more to it. You need to actually study the object to get all its details and proportions right and stuff. But this is the general theory that we're doing. So that's perspective. And then light, is pretty self-explanatory. You study a little bit of the physical properties of light, and you study how those physical properties look when they're hitting forms, and you kind of memorize that as well, or like internalize it, so that when you're drawing, when you're rendering something, you can imagine, okay, if I placed this light source here, where would the lights and shadows be in my subject? Um, so this part, this is our foundation. That was a lot of talking. Any questions? Sorry? How to study like these? Um, yeah, so you can plot all of these with perspective. Um, I'm not this is more of an overview, so I'm not going to get into it specifically, but all of these shapes can be plotted with perspective. There are a few steps, but it's not like super complicated. All it's all in my book as well. Um, yeah, good question though. I'm glad you asked that. I actually now I do remember the thing that I wanted to mention about observation. So when I'm talking about observation, are we going to go into details later, like next class? Let me circle back to that. Um, I do have a lot to say about future classes and stuff. Okay, so just going back to observation, I remembered what I wanted to say. It's really important when you're learning to draw from observation that you learn to draw from life, not from photographs. So if you're drawing from a photo, or when you're drawing from life, like I said, you're perceiving the forms, positions, and light, and then you translate that into visual elements. Um, so with a photo, because a photo is a still image, it already has visual elements, and your drawing or your painting or digital is also visual elements. So you don't really need to translate. You don't need to translate from form, position, and light into visual elements when you're working from a photograph. So you don't learn that translation skill. You can, like, it's possible to um, identify the forms, positions, and light in a photo and then translate those, but it's harder, and you still have the crutch with a photo where you can not do that. With life, there's withdrawing from life, withdrawing a real object, there's no way to avoid that translation, so it will force you to do it. Okay, so this is our foundation that we're going to build everything else on top of. You get in there. So from here, what about moving to like as far as forcing you to translate? That would be better than a still image, but it's still like a video is still a series of still images. And this isn't to say that you should never work from photographs. I use photo reference all the time. It's that if you're learning specifically to draw, then learning from life will equip you with skills that learning from photos, um, it's a lot harder to get from learning from photos. So, well, it's not that it's still, because um, when you're drawing from life, like whether it's moving or not, you're still having that visual experience that's not still images. You're having that visual experience of forms and position and light. Like photographs have lines and shapes, real life doesn't. Um, there's edges and stuff, but there's no actual shapes in real life. Shapes are two dimensional, lines are two dimensional. So you have to translate the 3D reality that you're seeing into those 2D elements. How do you draw from life? So drawing from life doesn't mean that you have to draw things that are moving. You could use still lifes. That's a good example. You can draw from a live model. They move a little bit, but they're still enough that you can study from them. Um, but yeah, this is one of those things that I'll expand on later on. Right now, we're just going through the base, but I still appreciate the question. So the end point here is that if you study an object, you can learn to draw that object with perspective from any angle. And if you study light, you can learn to light that object from any angle. But you probably want to do something more interesting than just some random object. But you use those skills to learn anything else. Most people want to learn anatomy because you want to draw people. So the same skills I use to draw this object, I can use to draw anatomical forms. So I can draw a skull, and it's not going to be great because I'm doing it quick, but I'm still like imagining its forms from an angle because I've studied enough to know its forms, and I'm using my skills of inventing forms that I can draw that skull. Do that with bones, do that with muscles, learn how they all connect, and then you can draw figures from imagination. It's not really that simple, but at least it gives you the raw material to learn to draw figures from that imagination. Still need to draw figures, you need to make design choices, but that gets you there. And another important thing about learning anatomy is that once you understand how to do this with humans, you can use this to study any subject. Like you break down human anatomy into bones and muscles. You learn to draw those bones and muscles. You recombine them. You could do the same thing if you wanted to learn any animal. You could, like, if you wanted to learn to draw cars really well, learn about the tires and the forms of the tires, the windshield, the frame, the headlights, and how that all fits together. And then you'd be able to do that from your head. Yeah, so that anatomy is not just about the figure, it's about a way of learning complex subjects in a way that lets you invent them later on. You can also, if you learn multiple complex subjects, or even just one, you can modify it or you can add other things together. So if I drew the skull like this, but what if I want to make it like say it's an orc or something. It's going to have less cranium, big jaw, big teeth. It's less chin, that kind of thing. So because I understand how to draw this with forms, I can modify them to do something creative with it instead of just having to stick with my reference or what I know. So anatomy, and then composition, which is composition is like it's how you use the visual elements themselves in order to direct the viewer's attention to specific things to make sure that they see your ideas and how you structure your ideas so that the most important ideas are the ones that the audience sees and knows they're the most important. Like going back to being a writer, how when you study writing composition, you don't just stream all your thoughts out. you organize them so you have ideas, and then other ideas support those ideas. It's the same kind of thing. Like going back to Polus Verso, um, the idea is that he's a gladiator, and gladiators are human, and we know that they're human because of the anatomy. And I can get into all of the supporting ideas here, like the skin, all the muscles, that kind of thing. And we know he's a gladiator because of his armor. We know it's armor because it's metal, and we know it's metal because of the way the light hits it. Like your ideas kind of stack until they get to the most basic, or where they touch the composition. So I know it's metal because of the color and the value. Like I know these muscles are these muscles because of form, and I know the form is the way it is because of shape and value. Um, so that is the theory. Very rambly take on it, but that is the theory. And if you look at the book that's on the official resources, that goes into all of the stuff I talked about in much more detail. So, how do you draw from life? How do you study these forms? All that kind of stuff. That goes into all of that with detail and with exercises. Um, so yeah, again, after I talk for a while, I want to hear other people's thoughts, and give me a second to collect my own before we get on to the next part. Or at least just give me a sign that you're still there. Okay, cool. Yeah. No, I understand that this is a fire hose of information. It's a lot all at once. I totally get that. Um, so thank you. Okay, so that's all the theory in like a a very condensed version. So yeah, that's why there's so much information. Like I'm packing a 600-page book into a 40-minute ramble. So yeah, it's going to be dense, and you can review the video, but even better, you can read all of the stuff. Um, so let's talk about how to actually put this into action. How to study this. Are we going to be using the book a lot, like as if we're in school? This is where I'm getting to with this. So the action that I want, or I would recommend you do when you're studying, is you're going to do. Uh, so this is your art. This is the drawing that you do, and I'm going to divide it into categories. So study and play. Study is the work you do to get better, and play is the work you do because you love to make art. Um, this is a really important distinction because there, I see a lot of artists become imbalanced in this, and it causes problems. Um, the one, it's funny because it seems like this is more of an internet versus real life thing. In real life, like my real life students, a lot of them are less so, but I still run into ones who just they only want to do the fun part. Like, oh, I know how to draw my characters. I have fun drawing my characters. Why are you making me draw this perspective stuff? My characters look fine the way they are. And you can learn a lot just by doing what's fun and following your artistic instincts, but it's not reliable. You're not, you kind of like stumble through a path, Like if you're in the forest, you're just kind of wandering and seeing where you end up. And maybe where you end up is where you want. Maybe it's not. And that's, if you're a hobbyist, that's fine. But if you want to be a professional, you need a reliable way to get there. You can't just be like, these are my characters, this is my style, this is what I want to draw in. Like, cool, but we're not going to pay you to do that. You need to draw this style. So you need the skills to get there. What I see a lot on the internet is the imbalance of study, where people think if you just study and study and study, then the play will automatically get better. Or you'll like, after I've drawn all of the boxes, after I've drawn the 250 boxes, then my work will be good. And that doesn't happen either. You get better at what you practice. So if you study a lot, you get really good at doing studies, but you don't get good at drawing like you. So you need both. You need to balance both. I can't really tell you how to balance both because that's a personal thing. But just the extremes will not take you where you want to go. Or at least, I mean, the play might, but it's not reliable. The study definitely won't unless you really, really just want to make art studies, in which case, have at it. So I further divide study into exercises and projects. So exercises are short term. They're like, they probably won't take you that long. And the result is not the point of an exercise. The point of an exercise is to put the theory into experience. Like, I can ramble all day about all this theory, but you don't fully understand it until you actually do it, until you physically make the moves to do it. So that's where exercises come in. And a good exercise is very specific. It's telling you exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how it should turn out. If it doesn't turn out that way, ideally you can look at the instructions and figure out why, so you can make the improvement that way. Projects they're kind of like play. It's some kind of result, some kind of drawing that you wouldn't be able to do if you didn't have the skills that you need to do it. So a good example of a project that I do in my animation school class is I have students design a room made out of boxes, and they have to draw that room from multiple angles, and it has to look like the same room every time. So you can't do that unless you understand the perspective that lets you plot out where everything should go in those rooms to make it look like the camera is in a specific part of that space. So projects, they give you feedback, because if they don't turn out, or if the skills are missing, you'll see that the skills are missing, or that you don't understand the skills when you're doing the projects. Ideally, this is where having a teacher comes in, because the teacher will look at the projects and the exercise, and they'll be able to give you feedback that helps you understand the concepts. So one of the most important things of my art career, one of the most important steps I did in my art career, is I planned my study. How many of you do this? How many of you have planned study time? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to help you overcome that. Um, so with exercises, does not matter if they don't look good. So that will free you up a lot from this. So the way I like to do study plans is you have your time. Personally, I like 90 minutes. I think that's a good amount of time before your brain starts going off doing other things too much. I know it's different for everybody, but 90 is like, that's about what I can do. And then I'm going to plan when this is. Like, when do I have 90 minutes? So I like the mornings. I get up at 7:30. I start doing my work at 9. I have 90 minutes to study. Um, and you want to plan these ahead of time, because if it's important, you will definitely do it. And if you told yourself that you're going to study at 7:30, and so let me step back. If you say, "Yeah, I'll probably study more this year. I want to study more this year," but you don't make any concrete plans, you're creating a little bit of dissonance. Like, "Oh, I'll study later," and then you don't. Then you can always tell yourself, "Well, later hasn't happened yet. I'll still study later." If you say, "Oh, I'm going to study for 90 minutes at 7:30," and then 9 o'clock rolls around and you didn't do it, then you let yourself down. I mean, life comes up, so I understand. It's like letting yourself down can be harsh, but if you were just like laying in bed scrolling on your phone instead of drawing, well, you fucked up. You didn't. You're not following your plans. Um, 30 minutes for exercises and 60 for projects. The other really useful thing about the uh, having a study schedule is that it will help balance these, because there's a tendency, and kind of keep you a lot more sane, because I know there's a tendency with artists to like, oh, I want to get good, so I'm just going to study. If I'm not studying, I feel guilty about it, and that can create a really negative pressure on you, and on your mental health. If instead you planned ahead of time, like, I'm going to study these study sessions, after you did them, congratulations, you did your plan. Go do whatever else you want with the rest of your free time, guilt free. You don't have to think like, oh, I should be drawing. Like, no, you did your time. Go relax, because that relaxation is super important as well. Um, so if this were a real course, and I hate to say it, but these free lectures are not. Uh, what would happen is we'll start in the middle because that's where we're at. I give my class theory, or I give my students theory in a mentorship. I give them exercises and projects. Then I will demo so that it's clear what those exercises and projects, as clear as possible, what I want them to do in the exercises and the projects. Then they will go off and do that. And when they come back, they get feedback, which keeps them on the right track. That is the cycle of teaching. And then if it's a course, you have a certain number of projects or one project, and an approximate idea of how long it's going to take to get to that project. So a course isn't like learn everything about drawing. It's learn these specific things within this time frame, and these are the projects. These are the skills you need to get there. So I'm not going to be able to do this in these free lectures, because I want these to be something I want them to be standalone. So if you miss one, you're not like falling behind, or if somebody's jumping in the middle, they'll still understand what's going on. It won't be like I don't want to have to tell people to go back and watch whatever lecture. So what I do have planned, I will tease this, is that I do have a free course that I'm going to release in a few weeks. It's going to be on observational drawing, and all of the stuff that I laid out, the study schedule, the exercises and the projects, it gives you specific exercises and a specific project to work towards. But that's not out yet. So for something to keep an eye out for later. If you're doing this on your own, you can use my book for the theory and the exercises. Unfortunately, you can maybe use some of the later exercises in each chapter can be used as projects. Um, Demo, it's a book. Can't really do that. And then feedback you can post on the server, but it's less reliable than like having a course with a teacher where you come back and get specific times. Yeah, so that's the study plan. Um, One thing that's all I had to cover. Thank you for coming. Um, I'm glad. I'm glad you like it. Hopefully, you all want to do this free course. I plan to do or plan. I hope to do paid courses in the future. So this would be like the format here, where I cover the theory and like I did here, but you would be able to do the whole cycle. So you'd get to um, I would do demos and you'd have exercises and projects, exercises every week, projects maybe multiple weeks, and then you would come back and get feedback. This is what I do in my real life classes. I would just be doing it online instead. Um, the thing that's holding me back from doing this is just there needs to be enough people who want to do it together at the same time to make it worth it. So I don't know where I'm at with that. Just something to keep in mind. I guess I'd like to gauge some interest in that. Is that something that you would want to do? Right. Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate you coming, and I will post all of these lectures online. Yeah, that is the issue too, right? That I need interest, and I need interest in like enough of a similar time zone that it's logistically possible. Um, but anyway, right now I'm just putting out feelers, and I'll just something to keep in mind. Like, and my DMs are always open, so if this is something that you want to do, like let me know what your availability is, that kind of thing. And then once I have enough interest, I can start trying to get logistics to work and make it happen, because it's something I'd really like to do, but it's not like I don't know if the logistics line up for it yet. um, cool. So um, yeah, if you're interested in doing free classes, or not free classes, if you're doing interested in doing paid courses, so it would be like a 10-week thing, and you would follow this kind of basically what I do in real life classes. Um, know that you're interested in what your availability is. Once I have enough interest, then I can start doing the logistics of actually figuring out how to make it work. In the meantime, there will be a free course. It's not as good as the paid course would be, because I'm not going to do like the feedback at the same level. Um, you know, because that takes time, and I gotta, yeah. But that the free course will, I think it will help. And actually, why don't I talk a little bit about what I want from that and what want from this whole thing in general. So my goal for this virtual classroom is eventually to like have enough interest that I can teach professionally online as well as in real life. Um, what I'm hoping for in the short term when I release this free class is that it works, and I've done the approach that I'm taking in the free course is stuff that I've already done with students in real life and it worked for them. So I expect it to work. And once you when you complete the projects and you see the improvement, that will be that becomes my social proof, my marketing, if you will, that those are the pelts I hang on the wall as a teacher, like the before and after drawings. So what I'm trying to do with the free course is set up a pipeline so that you guys learn the basics. And some of you already have the basics, but it gives you like a formal way to learn the basics, especially if you're newer and you don't have the basics yet. And those before and after pictures that you produce, other people will come to the server, they'll see them, they'll do the same thing, and then they'll want to. But it just proves that I can teach, so then other people will want to uh, do paid courses and mentorships and stuff. Cool. All right. Uh, any other thoughts or questions before we wrap? That's definitely enough. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think there's a minimum. Like if you're doing it otherwise, then that's a step in the right direction. Like is if you're studying at all, you're going to make progress. It's just how fast is the progress going to be? Cool. Well, I really appreciate everybody stopping by. This was a lot of fun for me as well, and hopefully you guys got something out of it too. Actually, well, you you're welcome. Actually, one more thing before we wrap, I'm going to tease next week's lecture because I'm going to do these weekly. So because we're doing the skull challenge next week, I am going to um, describe how I learned to draw the skull, and I'll do some demos of drawing skulls. All right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot going on in skulls. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot going on in the skull for sure. Well, hopefully I'll see you next week, or at least you'll be able to check out the lecture if you're in class at the time. And well, yeah, yeah. No, I understand. Yeah. So thanks again for coming, and hopefully I'll see you next week, and I'll see you or see the text versions of you, text and image versions of you on the server. My pleasure. Oh, my pleasure. Bye, everybody.